Welcome back, Beans Army, to another episode of the Less is More Sports Podcast, the college off-season podcast, where you could say we're less of the regular season, but more of the off-season, with the official off-season in both college basketball and college football in full swing. This officially starts the Less is More Sports regular season. So we have so much to talk about, and we're going to dive right into it. And we really don't have a set topic that's going to dominate this show. Matt and I are just going to talk about really all the craziness that's going on right now. And so to update the viewers right now, Ryan is off this week, but he and I will be doing a separate episode later on in the week where we're going to talk about the spring game because let's be honest, Matt doesn't give a shit about the spring games.
It's true.
It's true. And so that's kind of what we have planned for the podcast going forward. But for the time being, we have a lot to talk about today, and we're going to dive right into one of the bigger stories in the coaching hire world. And it's right in our backyard, well, a little bit south of me and Matt, with Lexington, Kentucky, with Kentucky officially hiring their head coach and Mark Pope. So, Matt, what were your thoughts on the Mark Pope to Kentucky hire?
Well, it was one of those things where it was just shocking at first because where you start out with the Scott Drew talk and the constant Billy Donovan talk, which will never end, and the Jay Wright out of retirement talk, which will also never end. And then it kind of comes down to Mark Pope, who, this is where it gets weird. It's like, I think you and I will agree. We don't think he's a bad coach by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, it's a better hire than I think people will actually want to admit from an X's and O's standpoint. The problem is your Hall of Fame coach just walked out the door and took like what the took a top recruiting class with him, and your replacement is a dude who, we've talked about this before, is a guy who's got the nostalgia goggles on, and it's kind of like, it seems like an epic downgrade, and I think it's just because John Calipari had that aura about him, had that Hall of Fame, had that national championship game, national champion aura to him, that it seems like it's a huge step down. And the thing is, too, we've seen schools in our area to varying degrees of success do exactly what Kentucky's done. Now, there's a lot to say whether it's a Mike Woodson, a Kenny Payne, or a Jawan Howard, how that plays out from that perspective. Because, we all know how Kenny Payne worked. We all know how Mike Woodson is doing. It's up and down, but there have been tournaments. And then there's Jawan Howard, who was like the wildest ride of all. But we've seen a lot of teams in our area do the alma mater route, and it's been varying degrees of failure to angry fan bases. So I don't think Kentucky's going to buck that trend. The most interesting thing about Kentucky's approach to this all was, when Woodson was hired, it was like, oh, he played with Knight. He was on the Big Ten championship team. He won this award and only played like 30 games not 30 games, only played like half that season. Kenny Payne got hired. The old adage long ago was Kenny Payne won those games, which we found out was a horrible, horrible lie. And even Jawan Howard was like, oh, Jawan Howard, the Fab Five. He stayed in the league long enough to play with LeBron. For Mark Pope, and someone, you can correct me on this if I'm wrong, it was like the WWE when they're trying to push a wrestler over when they did that press conference.
Yeah,
they're bringing
100%.
out they're bringing out the bus. He's got the national championship trophy. He's holding it up to the crowd like he's The Rock walking into WrestleMania after being gone for so long. It actually seemed like, Mitch Barnhart was trying to push his guy to like be the heavyweight champion of the world. And when you have to do that, it's usually not an indicator that you're going to have a great first year. And I hate that for the guy because, like I said, I think Mark Pope and John Calipari are polar opposites in the fact Kentucky will be better coached in game. I think Pope is a great X's and O's guy. He did more with less at BYU when they were in the WAC or the WCC and then the Big 12 conference. They did beat Kansas at Kansas this year. They've got good wins. But my question with that is, will he actually get the chance? Because, like I said, you made a move that seems like such a steep downgrade to an outside observer. I mean, the casual fans watching this, they do think that Kentucky the blue blood program can get whoever they want. And seeing that they had to rely on a guy who was and I don't mean this the wrong way, who's like who was a captain on a team that won a national championship, but probably isn't the first guy you think of when you think of the Untouchables. Let's be honest here. He's not the first guy you think of. And you have to sell him at a press conference. It looks like it's more like a high school pep rally combined with a WWE WrestleMania walk-in intro. It's it's a weird look to be in because, like I said, I think this guy is. I think Pope is a good coach. I think he's going to need more time than he'll be given to be as good as he can be. That's the problem because you're on a short leash now. I mean, the sky is falling in Lexington, and people are acting like it, and you're having to put it all together with a shortened off season now because you got into the game late. You're trying to figure out how to sell this guy, make sure people like him. I have diehard Kentucky fan friends who are like, I'm just going to see where this goes, which is their way of kind of quietly saying, man, I freaking hate this. So, I mean, the biggest thing for me with Pope is, will he be given a chance to be the coach that I think he can be? Or is because the fact that we're doing WWE press conferences already dooming him to, like, let's say Kentucky goes, I don't know, 8-26 their first year. Are they already going to be dooming him to, like, oh my God, he's Kenny Payne? So, what's going to happen? I mean, I think it's a good hire from an X's and O standpoint. The problem is when you're Kentucky, you've got an aura you have to maintain, and he does not fit the aura. You may be a great coach, but you've got to fit the aura. It's kind of like what happened with Kyle Neptune of Villanova. Jay Wright had the aura. Kyle Neptune is a good coach, I think, but he doesn't have the aura. And that can lead to some very interesting places.
No, I agree. And I think, and to a certain extent, you have to kind of sell this move because, when the news first broke that John Calipari was, leaving for Arkansas, they were swinging for the fences trying to find, the biggest name guys to hire. They went after Danny Hurley, went after Billy Donovan, et cetera, et cetera. And they swung for the fences and they didn't end up getting a lot of these big name coaches. So they had to go with, like you said, maybe they're not their first option and give him an offer that he technically couldn't refuse. Little Godfather reference there. And you kind of have to sell that to, convince the crowd, like, hey, this is the right guy. And we definitely agree that Mark Pope is a good X's and O's coach. But as we all know, he's gonna have his work cut out for him. Right now, there are two players on the Kentucky roster, and they're both incoming freshmen. You have Colin Chandler, the 6'4", 170-pound shooting guard from Utah, who was originally a BYU commit. And then, of course, you have Mr. Basketball in the state of Kentucky, Travis Perry, the now all-time leading scorer in high school basketball in the state of Kentucky. But that's your only two guys. And me personally, I don't think Travis Perry is ready to make an impact right away at the collegiate level. That's just from what I've seen of him play. I think he's a good couple-year player, but not ready to go right away. And, of course, now you look at and of course, they're going to be relying so much on the transfer portal here. And, I'm looking at some of the names that they've reached out to already, and it's a pretty long list of names. Some good names here, TJ Bamba, and of course, I know Amari Williams is visiting here soon if he hasn't visited already. And I want to throw one thing out of there. Jeremy Roach is not going to Kentucky. Let's be completely honest about that. And I do also want to address the Baylor rumors. So Baylor did not throw him $1.5 million. I know that was a popular Twitter rumor. That is not true. Jeremy Roach has debunk that theory already. But anyways, and where I'm going with this, Matt Jones, you were awfully worried about Duke. You need to be worried about your own guys because, again, there's only two guys on the team right now, and you don't know who you're going to get from the portal. Yeah, you might be getting some good players, but you're going to have a team that did not play for the university last year. That's not something even Duke can say. Duke's going to have a lot of new faces too, but at least they have Tyrese Proctor and Caleb Foster coming back. So Kentucky, again, we both agree that Kentucky needed to sell this move because let's be honest, it wasn't option number one. And even though he's a good coach, he is going to have his work cut out for him. And he's not, and that's the big question. Is Big Blue Nation going to want to be patient with him? Because this is the same fan base that turned on John Calipari. And John Calipari, we all remember how he began his Kentucky career. He began his Kentucky career as about as good as you could begin a career anywhere. And because of the lack of success in the postseason the last 4 or 5 years, they quickly turned on him. So yeah, I think we're in agreement overall about the Mark Pope hire, and of course, all this being set up from the John Calipari move to Arkansas. We didn't really get a chance to dive deep into that move, so we'll do that here on this show. Matt, I guess my main question is: Arkansas now the hot spot, like DeMarcus Cousins said?
That's going to be interesting to find out because the one advantage Arkansas has is they have a lot of donors with a lot of money. The NIL there is going to be deep and it's going to be, well, I don't know. I don't know. The thing about Arkansas too, like they have a lot of donors, but there's primarily two big ones, which are Tyson Foods and Walmart. But if there's anyone you want to have in your corner, it's probably literally one of the biggest department stores in the world, and the people who make chicken who already got you like John Calipari out of Kentucky. Now, people are dunking on Arkansas. They dunk on Fayetteville all the time. Like, who wants to go there? I don't. I think what people need to realize is that like that northwest corner of Arkansas, which is like home to all of the Walmart people, all of the Tyson people, it's not like the rest of Arkansas. Their WalMarts have drones that deliver stuff. They have an art museum that's one of the top notch art museums in the world with outside art installations that are just absolutely gorgeous. They have the Ozark Mountains on their side. It's a gorgeous area of the country naturally. And with those families like putting their money into the Bentonville, Fayetteville, Rogers, Arkansas area, it's a very beautiful area in terms of architecture, in terms of natural beauty, and there's a lot of money there. So for all the people who think like, oh no, no way in hell these kids are going to go to like the middle of the holler in Arkansas and play basketball, that's not what Fayetteville is like. That's not what that area of Arkansas is like. It's very modern. It's very beautiful. It's absolutely gorgeous. It has mountain views, and you're getting $1 million from the guys who own Walmart to come play there. And, we oftentimes forget too that Arkansas does have a history of being good at basketball. They have a national championship. They had Nolan Richardson. They had Joe Johnson. They had Sidney Moncrief. It's not like this. It's not like they had Corliss Williamson. It's not like this program never does anything, hasn't won anything, doesn't exist. I mean, even with Musselman, they were relevant. They made the Sweet 16 back to back years. So it's not like that this is going to be that hard of a sell. But at the same time, Arkansas isn't a blue blood. They're not what Kentucky is. They're not what Duke is. They're not what UConn is. They're not probably even what IU and Louisville are, to be honest with you. But with John Calipari there, we know that his strength is recruiting. And in a move that drags in everybody in everyone in this area in, who does he bring along with him but the guy who won all those games, Kenny Payne, as an assistant head coach? And if that adage is true, then maybe he's better off like just recruiting guys, being the bag man, for lack of a better term, to get kids to come to Fayetteville. But I will say this, Les, there's an old George Jones song called "She Thinks I Still Care." And the basic premise is there's a guy who's just going through a breakup, and he's like, just because I accidentally said her name at a bar, just because I accidentally called her phone, just because I'm not the happy guy I used to be, she thinks I still care. And John Calipari, man, you're giving me those vibes. You are giving me sad country breakup song vibes. When you walked into that airport and you heard those Woo Pig Sueys, it was like a part of your soul left your body, man. I know you're still a great recruiter. I know you're going to have success at Arkansas, but I think you're finding out now that maybe the grass wasn't greener on the other side of the mountains. Maybe you're missing the Appalachians and you want to go back to the Ozarks. I don't know. Or you're missing the Appalachians from the Ozarks. I don't know. But I mean, the guy just looked like had the face of someone who couldn't believe they actually did it. Like that face you make after like you've had just one too many and you like do something stupid for your friends. He couldn't believe he just did that, and that's what it looked like at that press conference. Now, granted, like I said, Arkansas is going to be fine. Calipari is a good recruiter. You have a lot of NIL money from those primary families, and it's a beautiful area of the country, regardless of what people say. And you're playing in the SEC, which, as we all know, after the expansion wars are done, is going to be one of the two major conferences. So if you're Arkansas, you're set up perfectly fine. But I mean, we look at our Arkansas. It's like John Calipari said, though, the same problem Mark Pope's going to have, the same problem Pat Kelsey has. I met with the team. There is no team. Big Z does not a roster make, and it's going to be interesting to see once again the players you can get on short notice. How many of that great recruiting class actually does, go strictly for Cal, believes in the La Familia as opposed to the branding. And it's going to be interesting to see how that first year goes for Cal. I mean, obviously, he's not going to get fired after 1 year. But it's going to be, I wouldn't be surprised if we see a lot of struggles from Arkansas just because I don't know what that roster is going to look like either. That's the thing. But I mean, with your Arkansas, it's a move you've got to make because you've got the money, you can get a recruiter, you've got the facilities, you've got the conference. Take a shot, see what happens. Put a little mud in Kentucky's eye, see what you can get out of it.
Well, I think one thing that John Calipari is going to have going for him is that even though, like we said, Arkansas does have a basketball history, they don't have Kentucky's basketball history. So the battle of expectations aren't going to be there every year. As long as they are relatively competitive, the fan base is probably going to be more than okay with that. And if we're talking about a guy that, if we're talking about two coaches that have both met with the team, there is no team. Well, let's be honest, if there's one coach of the two that you're going to be more comfortable with in that position, it's going to be John Calipari. John Calipari's always been one of the best, if not the best recruiter in college basketball history. And we expect a lot of the guys to Kentucky to follow them. As I'm looking at the high school recruiting interest list right here. And of course, it's all the guys from Kentucky: Jaden Cadence, Boogie Fland, Carter Knox, Billy Richmond, Samoto Cyril. All of them are targeted right now, plus Liam McNeely. If they land him, that'd be huge. The big recruit I think he needs to bring from Kentucky is Jaden Cadence. Because of his age, Jaden Cadence is going to have to spend a minimum of 2 years in college. Now, of course, this is a different era. There is the transfer portal. We don't know if Cadence does commit to Arkansas and say it maybe doesn't go as he planned or maybe doesn't get the NIL money. There's always that chance he could leave. But with the fact that he has to at least spend 2 years in college, it gives you a better percentage of at least bringing in a guy that you can build something around. And then, of course, you look at who they've contacted through the portal, and a lot of big names here. Of course, Jeremy Roach is thrown in there again. Kobe Bree from Dayton. Did I pronounce that right?
I think so. Yeah, you get it.
And of course, DJ Wagner from Kentucky, but then Dylan Mitchell from Texas. I know firsthand, dude can jump out of the gym, and John Calipari loves those athletes. And then there's Brandon Garrison, very good defensive player from Oklahoma State. But yeah, I mean, if there's a guy that we trust in a situation where we've met with a team, there is no team, it is John Calipari. So I worry about that more with Mark Pope, for sure, than I do with John Calipari, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah, so I think, does that wrap up everything we have to say about Mark Pope in Kentucky and John Calipari in Arkansas?
Yeah, pretty much, because there's not a lot to break down, like you said, when there is no team.
Right, exactly. So yeah, I'm sure that'll be a conversation as we get deeper into the Less is More sports regular season and the college basketball and college football off season, if you will. But I think it's time to move on to, I guess, if there is a main topic of this show, it is going to be the absolute craziness that is the transfer portal. The thing is, what's crazy about it right now is that both the basketball transfer portal and the college football transfer portal are officially open. So we're just getting absolute chaos right now. I don't know about you, Matt, but I'm like refreshing my Twitter page like every few seconds just to see if what move has been made now. And before we lead into, I guess, our first question of this topic, I want to start with an analogy that leads into a question. With both the transfer portals for basketball and football open at this time, people are giving so many mixed reactions about it. And it reminds me of a lot of the welfare argument. Welfare is designed to help a lot of people, but there's always the argument of those who take advantage of it. So as we relate it to the modern state of college sports with NIL and the portal, is there an option to regulate this at all? Or do we just accept it like, DeMarcus Cousins said on a recent podcast, that this is just reparations for how the NCAA has treated student athletes for so long? What are your thoughts?
I will say that first off, that I do agree with DeMarcus Cousins. The NCAA has earned this reckoning in so many ways, shapes, and forms that it's hard to exactly say like, "Oh my god," and like weep about it. I will say that. Do I think regulations will happen? Yes, I do. But I mean, the bottom line is amateurism is dead. Amateurism is no longer a thing. It was stupid. The way we knew it was dumb. We don't need it anymore. I'm glad amateurism as we knew it is dead. Now, regulation, I don't know what's going to be the straw that breaks the camel's back for that kind of thing. And I don't even know if Congress or governing bodies would sign off on any laws that would limit that. The one thing, and this is going to sound really dumb because guess what? We're already it, we're already heading in that direction in some ways, and it just makes sense. Which is, if basketball and football are going to be a minor league for the NBA, NFL, etc., we're going to head to the point where an NIL deal is basically a contract. Like if you sign like a you sign it's here for 2 years, we'll give you like $2.1 million, $1 million a year, or something like that. Or you say for 3 years, we'll give you even more, and you get yada yada this, yada yada that. I think that's the only way you can guarantee stuff like that because we've already heard rumors. Like you said, there was Jeremy Roach rumors. Indiana had one with Omar Ballo of paying $1.2 million. There was the rumor of AJ Store wanting all that money to stay put. There are more than a few like stories about this already, and I mean, it's probably going to head to that point where we have like contracts. You stay for 2 years. If it's allowed by the federal government, you stay for a couple years. You make your NIL, and then you can go on. It's just like they do it like the NBA or the NFL. I mean, that's just how it is because eventually people are going to get tired of, and this is the story that I read into last night when you told me about it. Like the Penny Boone story. The guy's not going to play a down for Louisville football, but he's collected his NIL and he's already going to move on. So it's like people I think, are going to get tired of that, especially the people who are like donating to these NIL funds. Right now, it's funny because, like Demarcus Cousins said, this is like the payback, the big payback. It was a long time coming. The NCAA did nothing. They're getting their comeuppance. It's funny. But in the future, it's going to frustrate more and more people. And eventually, I think we're heading toward basically what we call like deals now. We're going to be reporting it just like we do any free agent deals in baseball, where somebody signs for a year, has a bet on me year, and then moves up a class. And, the more interesting thing about the transfer portal to me is how does this affect recruiting? You know, if you're a team, why would you risk recruiting a guy from the point he's in eighth grade and investing all your trips and finances into him and giving him an NIL deal as a freshman, and he sticks around for 1 year and immediately dumps you for a program that he thinks is bigger or better or offers some more money? When you can just poach a guy from another program and be like, you know what? I'd rather have an experienced guard who like proved to me he can play at the Division 1 level. I don't want to take a risk on Johnny from Sioux Falls, who's like the number 5 overall point guard. But what if he sucks? I'd rather take this proven commodity, throw money at him, and keep moving. So I'm going to be interested to see how that affects freshmen going forward. Will we see more freshman players, even some who are in like the top 100 or top 50, making their way to smaller schools, playing a year there, playing a year there, seeing how it works out, proving their commodity, and then moving up? Are we heading for like a baseball system basically? Like double A, triple A, single A. You're finally in the big leagues, something like that. Are we headed for something like that? And that's going to be interesting to see. And the second thing is what we need to accept is, people are going to have a hard time adjusting to this. But we joked and laughed about guys like Perry Ellis playing for 35 years, Sam Decker playing for 35 years. Those days are over. You're going to have a hard time now finding people outside of like, colonial athletic associations, the mid majors that I love so much, who are going to like be there for 4 years. It's going to be a constant state of flux and movement for a lot of these guys. There are no more Tyler Walls. There are no more Perry Ellises. There are no more 4-year guys really at one place, unless they just want to be like that. And that's going to be interesting to see too. I mean, the dynamics are shifting at a very fast rate, and there are so many ways this is going to go that we haven't even predicted or mentioned yet. But those are the three for me, which is we're going to be heading for contracts probably. How does this affect how schools value and view freshman players? And the era of that 4 year guy you love to hate are coming to an end. Those are the three big takeaways for me. Do I think they're bad? No. I mean, this is just what life is. You never step in the same stream twice. You're just going through the motions and time is moving forward. That's just what it is. We can't help it. We can't stop it. We just kind of roll with it. And we're going to have fun watching games regardless of how they're played or who's making what money.
Speaking of roll with it, that's going to lead us to our next topic. We're not really topics. Where we're going to go to our next segment where we talk about some of the top transfer stories that we've been following since the transfer portal has really opened up. And Matt, I'll give you a chance to catch your breath here. And what we're going to do is I'll go into, I'll give my topic, Matt will give his, and then so on and so on. We'll kind of alternate from here. So one of the first transfer stories I've been following is the Cormani McClain transferring from Colorado story, because this one was very shocking to me. Cormani McClain, as a lot of you all know, very talented cornerback prospect coming out of high school, played a little bit last year for Colorado. And this, in my opinion, this would have been the year where he comes in playing next to Travis Hunter as the legitimate shutdown corner on the Colorado football team. But then, of course, obviously, all of it's looking good. I mean, all of it's looking promising. He's learning from Deion Sanders, and then he decides to transfer. And now he's opened up his transfer market, and it is gone absolutely bananas. To give you an idea, the lead crystal ball right now, according to 24/7 Sports, is him going to Florida, but that is only at 14%. When 14% is your highest crystal ball right now, you are wide the freak open right now. 11 schools are what he's quote unquote narrowed it down to at this point. And now what I love about this is one of those schools is Texas, as we've reached the 10 minutes to go mark. As a Texas fan, obviously I would love to bring in Cormani McClain to come in and play next to Malik Muhammad. I know with McClain, this comes with a lot of baggage, but you can't deny the talent. So my number one was Cormani McClain. Matt, we got to roll through all these. So we got about 10 minutes to go.
The first thing that shocked me in the transfer portal was if you had a team that went 8-24 and 0-18 in their conference in basketball, would you expect them to get four top transfers at all?
No, you wouldn't.
You wouldn't, and yet I don't know what Dennis Gates is doing at Missouri or what he's offering these guys in Columbia, but my lord, they put together one hell of a transfer class in like no time with a horrible record. They start out, they get Martin's Jacob Cruz, a great forward. You get Marquise Warwick from NKU. He's a stellar shooting guard. Tony Perkins from Iowa, shout out, obligatory. And you get Mark Mitchell, a guy you know fairly well from Duke, already on that roster for a team that went 0-18 and lost to Vanderbilt in conference play last season. I don't know what's in the water in Columbia, Missouri. I don't know what the NIL deals are like out there, but that is just absolutely shocking to me what Dennis Gates has been able to do this offseason. I mean, that's basically a starting lineup right there of very solid, very good guys for a team that did not impress and failed to meet a lot of expectations last year. So kudos.
So I guess my number two story, of course, I've been following, and you probably could have guessed it. It's going to be the transfer market with what's going on at both Duke and Texas. Duke, I know, has gotten a lot of buzz as of recent, with 7 guys who have been officially gone from last year's team and only 2 guys coming in. I mean, 2 guys returning from last year's team. But a lot of Duke's transfers, I think, were to be expected. I think the only 2 surprises were Sean Stewart and TJ Power. But I think that has more to do with who Duke is expected to land through the transfer portal. I mean, you've heard the rumors of Mason Gillis from Purdue coming in. You've heard the rumors of Malik Brown from Syracuse coming in. And, there's also some rumors about Brandon Angel from Syracuse. And then to top it off, they have one of, if not arguably the greatest on paper recruiting class coming in, led by the Duke recruit Cooper Flagg himself, who I will watch tomorrow in the Jordan Brand Classic game. But I think Texas is another interesting one from the basketball standpoint, because this is 2 years in a row that we have a bunch of guys leaving through the portal, and and last year it kind of made sense because a lot of these guys may have been loyal to Chris Beard, and this was Rodney Terry's, first, and last year was Rodney Terry's first official offseason as the full-time head coach of Texas. But this year, I mean, there's 6 guys leaving. We have 3 guys and pretty good players: Julian Larry, Jason Kent, Tremont Mark, all good players, and of course a solid recruiting class coming in with Trey Johnson and Cam Scott. But at first, it was surprising to see guys like Tyrese Hunter and Dylan Mitchell leave, but then I remembered last year these were guys that were wanting to test the waters too in the NBA. So I feel like they did their time, and then they feel like they could maybe do better elsewhere. So I don't know. Texas's transfer portal fiasco, whatever. It is surprising, but it's not at the same time. And then, of course, with the football transfer portal open again, Texas, they need to add depth at the defensive tackle position. 2 guys that I'm really hoping they land: Dominic Williams from TCU and Jay Tioa from UCLA. That's what I've been following from my teams.
Well, I guess with that, I'll talk a little bit about what I really enjoyed watching, which is Mike Woodson's very weird and intriguing roster construction that's been going on lately. Like we started out 3 weeks ago thinking that, oh my God, there's not going to be anybody left on the roster. Everyone's leaving. Ah! And instead, everybody except 3 guys who were expected to leave stayed. You've added in Bryson Tucker. You've added in Omar Ballo. You've added in Miles Rice. And now you're probably going to add Kanan Carlisle sometime this weekend. And anybody else you get beyond that point is probably just going to have to be a role player, whether that's a guy like Leland Walker from EKU, whether that's a guy like Ben H., I can't pronounce his last name, from Evansville, whether that's Pharrell Payne from Minnesota, I don't know. It basically comes down to getting guys who will accept the role coming off the bench. But Indiana out of nowhere is now like playing a little bit with depth, and I don't think a lot of fans expected that because like if they get a few more guys in there, it's like wow, there's some depth here because you were forced to play Gabe Cupps all last year. You've got some depth going now, so it's going to be interesting to see what Mike Woodson does from that standpoint. So yeah, it went from an offseason that looked like everything, the sky was falling. Mike Woodson was Kenny Payne. They're going 6-36 or something stupid. And now it's like, oh, well, they've added 3 guys, probably going to add 4 and possibly even more. Maybe it's not as bad as we thought. So, a shout out there to Mike Woodson, even though I do, I don't know how to feel about like Mike Woodson's love of back to the back centers, but the past couple years it's been okay. He's going to find one. He probably hugged Omar Bala when he saw him. He's like, you are my new anointed one. You are the new Khalil Ware. Well, thank you, Pac 12, in your dying days for this gift. And he's probably very excited to have him. And we're going to be, I'm sure Indiana will be excited to have him too. But yeah, credit to Mike Woodson for turning what was a very toxic, very potentially disastrous offseason into so far being really positive. I mean, I don't know where it's gonna go from here, but right now, positive.
What's funny is how I said we pretty much have to refresh our Twitter feeds every few seconds just to find out everything that's going on.
Oh God, what
Well,
happened?
ironically enough, as one of the transfer stories I've been following, as of 6 minutes ago, literally 6 minutes ago, since we've been on this podcast, Aiden Holloway has committed to Alabama. And
Whoa.
ironically, that's what I was going to talk about next because Aiden Holloway, if you remember, I've gotten on this podcast saying that he was the best shooter in his recruiting class. And of course, he's transferring from Auburn and he's going to Alabama. So many Benedict Arnold references are going to come out with this. This is wild. And then, but ironically
Alabama.
enough, I think he fits Alabama's system better than Auburn's because again, Nate Oates coaches a 3-point heavy offense. And with Holloway's shooting ability, this could thrive right now. So
If
that's
you were
why I was following that super close. But
This
and
is
then
why the portal is weird because Alabama just made the Final Four, for God's sake. Nick Pringle is in the transfer portal, and they're adding guys like Hollow. This is why it's crazy. It's because it's a. I don't even know if it's addition by subtraction. It's just constant movement, and
right,
that's a wild one for a team that made the Final Four.
right. How many do you have? Because I got about 2 left, and we got about 2 minutes, so we got to do a speed round.
I've got two left, or I could do three, but I've got two that I want to cover, so we can go really fast. We got this.
All right. What you got?
Well, I'm going to talk a little bit about Xavier real quick, who 9 guys out, but they bring in four very impressive guys, just highlighted now by Ryan Conwell coming in from Indiana State. You've got Dante Maddox, you got Marcus Foxer, you got John Hewley. That's a very loaded roster, in spite of the fact they've lost 9 guys. I don't know what Sean Miller's doing, if he's getting back into his old Arizona wiretap days, because now you can do that. Xavier, they're going to be a really good team, and we're going to have to watch them closely next season.
Of course, one of the ones I also want to talk about was the Caden Proctor mess. As you know, he transferred from Alabama to Iowa. He literally did not play it down at Iowa, reaped the NIL benefits, and now he's transferring back to Alabama. Very much a Penny Boone situation, for Iowa. But that's what I wanted to talk about a little bit, was that freaking mess. But that's all I have to say about that. What's your last one, Matt?
Freaking Kansas, man. I guess they heard us make fun of them for being so overrated last year, because now they've just decided to go out and create the Avengers of basketball. You've got Badinga, you've got LeBaron Philon, you add AJ Story, you've got Zeke Mayo, Riley Kugel, underrated ad from Florida. They could get Rylan Griffin. They could get Hunter Dickinson to come back. I think Kansas heard us all like enjoying their downfall, and now they're decided that Bill Self. Now they decide Bill Self is an effing gangster, as Trilly Donovan says, and he's looking to go ham on the Big 12 and the world next year, because that Kansas team, even if they don't add anybody else, is already loaded. If they get Hunter Dickinson to come back and add in Rylan Griffin, oof, that's a big oof.
And I'm going to end with TCU really fumbled the bag, because they landed the transfer from Haley Van Lith, but they didn't keep Haley Cavender, because the social media buzz, the NIL deals would have been absolutely crazy. And I have a feeling a lot of guys would have been tuning into some TCU women's
And the
games.
shooting would have been great too.
And the shooting would have been great too.